And welcome back to Hannity. So earlier today, the president issued a tweet reassuring DACA's so-called dreamers, writing, quote, "For all those DACA that are concerned about your status during the 6-month period, you have nothing to worry about, no action." Now, clearly, President Trump is trying to restore the rule of law and the Constitution and not usurp the powers of the legislative branch. But some Democrats are just hell-bent on painting the president as unhinged. It never stops. Joining us now, the author of the 12-week bestseller, #1 New York Times bestseller, Understanding Trump, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich, who, by the way, also is launching in early September, in about a week or so, a new online series entitled Defending America. All right, I want to get to that in a second. Let me just stay on the hurricane, if I can, for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker. This is important. You know, if the only thing the media can criticize is Melania's shoes, and that's basically all they had, and you saw the governor, and you saw local officials, and you saw the federal government really come together in an organized fashion with next to zero complaints. And I've talked to people in Florida. They are working and coordinating in a similar fashion there, so I got to expect the same results. Doesn't that tell you something about where people's mindset is?
Well, look, I think the country is delighted and encouraged that you could have effective government that works, and you could have everybody, state, local, federal, pulling in the same direction. You could have professional competence, as the president said a few minutes ago. You have people who are committed to doing their job. You have the American military being mobilized. This 1-2 punch of Houston and Louisiana and now Florida is probably as big a natural disaster punch as we've had, certainly in my lifetime. I feel it at a direct level. I have a daughter who lives in Florida, and she's right in the middle of this. And, you know, it's very sobering when you look at the size of this storm and the power. But I think it is encouraging. And by the way, let me just say on behalf of the president, I think part of the reason he cut the deal he did yesterday on a bipartisan basis to get 90 days funding, and I think the Senate actually has already moved today on this. He was trying to continue a momentum of being together, of doing something together, and of showing that the American government can act quickly. If they can get the money out of Washington to Houston this week, setting the stage, by the way, for potentially challenges next week in Florida, I think that's another signal to the American people that maybe some things are coming together, and maybe President Trump, who has a natural background in construction and in property and in looking at this sort of thing, maybe he, in fact, is going to be able to pull the country together the way they came together in Texas.
You got to hope so. I look at this storm, and I literally, it's chilling to see the cities that will be impacted. The entire state is engulfed by this hurricane. This is going to be, as people are predicting, could be one of the worst storms ever. You know, both of us are conservative. We believe in limited government, greater freedom, more responsibility, opportunity society. And the federal government plays an important role, safety and security. And hopefully they don't get in the way of prosperity, which I would argue they often do. But isn't this one of the times that government can really step up and help people, sure, like in Texas, like in Florida? And government worked this time. It's nice to see it works occasionally. I'm not the biggest fan of it.
Look, I always try to remind people that the Founding Fathers developed a Constitution for a limited but effective government. They didn't want a sloppy government. They didn't want an incompetent government. They wanted it to be limited in order to protect our freedom and our privileges and our rights as citizens. But when it moved, they wanted it to move very effectively. These were people who, after all, had practiced for 8 years the art of war against the British Empire. They knew what it took to be effective. And I think they would look at what's happening in Texas and say, you know, the system's working at every level. You have local leadership. You have state leadership. Governor Scott's getting great marks for being an act. Again, he's an entrepreneur like Trump. And you have federal leadership with President Trump. And it's all pulling in the same direction. And I think that's what's encouraging the American people. After all this gridlock, all this nastiness, all these vicious stories, here you have the American government coming together and the American people coming together in a positive way.
I've been very outspoken and disappointed about the Republicans not keeping their promises. From my perspective, and you know, having been Speaker and having accomplished a lot as Speaker, I would argue that they have 14 weeks to really get their act together. And that would include changing the tax code, 7 brackets to 3, repatriated money from multinationals, trillions, corporate cuts, middle-class tax cuts, small business cuts, energy independence, build the wall. I'm not that overly optimistic that these guys are going to get their job done. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm moderately optimistic, particularly on what I think is the biggest assignment, and I really like what Secretary Mnuchin has been saying in his various television interviews. I like very much what Speaker Paul Ryan said today in an interview or a press conference, I guess it was. Their commitment is to get all of this done, hopefully by Thanksgiving. To be able to give the American people, as Mnuchin described it yesterday, a tax form about the size of a large postcard for the average American. I mean, if they can pull that off, if they can get to a 15% corporate rate, if they can get to a big tax cut for small business, this would be the achievement. If I were them, I would mark every week against getting the tax cut done. We can get everything else done once the tax cut's done, but let's get it signed by Thanksgiving so that the first quarter of next year you see a real surge of economic growth, probably starting, frankly, with the Christmas period, because if people see a big tax cut coming, you're going to have a pretty big Christmas in this country.
Yeah. You know, I had a front row seat to your ascendancy to become Speaker. I was a local radio guy in Atlanta, and I was emceeing the night you became Speaker. But prior to that, you had created a series. It was called Renewing American Civilization. It really was the foundation of ideas and solutions to make the country better. And I always argue that people ask me, I say, you're a professor and a historian at heart and not a politician, because I've known you, these couple of decades. You now basically are starting that role up again with Defending America. Real quick, tell us how people can join that class of yours.
Well, all they can do is just go to defendingamericacourse.com. Phase 1 is going to be 6 sessions. It's really on how to defeat the left intellectually, the arguments that allow us to remind people why America is unique, why American history matters, and why being patriotic is important. I think people will find that defendingamerica.com has some defendingamericacourse.com has some very, very good ideas on it. And you're right, it's part of something I used to do. I believe in teaching, and I believe in an informed citizenry. All right, and we'll put it up on Hannity.com, my website. Mr. Speaker, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.